Welcome back to The Lost Tactician, where history becomes your teacher and survival becomes your instinct. Today we're peeling back the layers of time to examine something you might never have considered a weapon of war, fabric itself. Not the flags that flew over battlefields, but the cloth that kept soldiers alive when everything else had failed. The textiles of World War II weren't just uniforms or equipment covers. They were technological marvels, engineered under the pressure of global conflict to withstand conditions that would destroy modern gear in hours. What our grandfathers wore into the jungles of the Pacific and the frozen forests of Europe holds secrets that could save your life today. This is the story of the unbreakable cloth of World War II and why it matters more now than ever. Picture a paratrooper over Normandy in June 1944, his life literally hanging by threads as he descends through a sky filled with tracers and shrapnel. That parachute canopy above him isn't made from whatever material was cheapest or easiest to produce. It's ripstop fabric, a revolutionary weaving technique developed in the early 1940s that changed textile engineering forever. The designers understood something profound. A single tear in conventional fabric propagates catastrophically, but if you reinforce the weave with thicker threads in a crosshatch pattern every few millimeters, you create natural stop points. The tear hits that reinforced grid and halts. The paratrooper lives. This wasn't just clever engineering. It was survival mathematics written in cotton and nylon. The military's demands were brutal and uncompromising. Equipment had to function in the humid rot of New Guinea jungles, the abrasive coral atolls of the Pacific, the sub-zero nights of the Ardennes, and the scorching deserts of North Africa. There were no supply chains that could replace gear every few weeks. When a Marine hit the beach at Guadalcanal, his equipment needed to last months of constant use, sleeping in mud, crawling through undergrowth that shredded conventional cloth, and enduring salt spray that corroded metal and rotted ordinary textiles. The answer was what sailors called jungle cloth, densely woven cotton in patterns like Bedford cord or whipcord that created a textile so tough it could deflect thorns and resist tearing even when soaked and stretched. Consider the US Navy's N1 deck jacket, issued to sailors facing the brutal North Atlantic and Pacific winters. The outer shell was jungle cloth, but the genius lay in understanding how textiles interact with human physiology under stress. The dense weave created thousands of tiny air pockets that trapped body heat while remaining breathable enough to vent moisture from exertion. A sailor working in freezing spray stayed warmer in this cotton jacket than he would in many modern synthetic shells, because the designers understood that managing moisture is as critical as insulation. Wet synthetic fabrics cling and conduct heat away from the body. Wet cotton in a proper weave maintains its structure and continues insulating. Then there's ballistic nylon, perhaps the most appropriately named fabric ever created. Developed specifically for flak jackets, this material was woven so tightly and with such high tensile strength fibers that it could slow or stop metal fragments moving at hundreds of feet per second. The soldiers who wore these early flak vests weren't just protected by thickness, they were shielded by textile engineering that distributed impact forces across interlocking fibers. Modern ballistic nylon remains among the most abrasion-resistant materials ever created for civilian use, outlasting most synthetics by orders of magnitude. A rucksack made from genuine ballistic nylon can be dragged across rocks, stuffed with sharp tools, and used daily for decades without failure. But perhaps no material better illustrates WWII textile ingenuity than waxed cotton. British and American forces developed sleeping systems using cotton canvas treated with paraffin wax that created a naturally waterproof, breathable shelter. Unlike modern coated fabrics that trap condensation, waxed cotton breathes enough to release body moisture while shedding rain. A soldier could roll himself in this material on frozen ground and wake dry, the fabric having created a microclimate that managed both external precipitation and internal perspiration. This principle, Working with natural fiber properties rather than trying to seal everything behind plastic barriers produced better results than many modern waterproof breathable membranes. Walk through any modern outdoor retailer and you'll find wool making a comeback, marketed as a rediscovered wonder material. But your grandfather already knew what marketers are just relearning. Military wool uniforms of WWII weren't chosen from tradition. They were selected because wool performs miracles that synthetics still cannot match. Wool is naturally flame-resistant, crucial when soldiers lived surrounded by explosives, fuel and tracer rounds. It insulates even when soaking wet because the individual fibers retain their crimped structure and continue trapping air. A soldier caught in freezing rain stayed functional in wool, where cotton would have meant hypothermia and synthetics would have meant misery. Wool breathes, wicking moisture away from skin while simultaneously providing insulation. It's naturally antimicrobial, meaning soldiers could wear the same wool uniform for weeks without the bacterial growth that makes modern synthetic base layers unwearable after just a few days. And crucially for survival, wool is repairable. A tear in wool cloth can be darned, sewn, or even felted back together using nothing but water and friction. This aligned perfectly with the wartime make-do and mend philosophy that wasn't just propaganda, it was, honestly, a tactical necessity. Today's survival and outdoor industry has become enamored with space-age synthetics, often forgetting that natural materials engineered correctly can actually outperform laboratory creations in real-world conditions. The principles embedded in World War II textiles offer, I think, critical lessons for modern survivalists. Durability isn't just about initial strength, it's about how materials degrade over time. Ripstop fabric doesn't prevent damage, but it does prevent catastrophic failure. That's the difference between a torn pack you can still use and a shredded pack that's, well, worthless. The repairability of these materials matters desperately in extended survival situations. You can sew torn canvas with a needle made from bone. You can re-wax cotton using rendered animal fat or plant waxes. You can felt wool back together or unravel it for cordage. Modern synthetic fabrics, once damaged, are often irreparable in field conditions. They melt rather than burn, so there's no way to cauterize tears closed. They degrade in ultraviolet light, meaning long-term storage or extended use weakens them, sometimes invisibly. The gear that kept soldiers alive for years of warfare often proves more resilient than equipment that fails after just a single season of weekend camping. The textiles our grandfathers wore into history's greatest conflict weren't chosen for comfort or cost. They were selected because failure meant death, and success meant survival against odds we can barely imagine. Those choices, ripstop to contain damage, dense weaves to resist abrasion, wool to manage moisture, waxed cotton to create shelter, ballistic nylon to stop fragments, represent engineering driven by the ultimate pressure test, global war. We live in an age of disposable gear and planned obsolescence, but the principles woven into World War II cloth remain timeless. Durability, repairability, and understanding how materials interact with real conditions. These aren't just nostalgic ideals, they're survival fundamentals. The next time you choose gear for the field, ask yourself, would this have kept a Marine alive on Guadalcanal? Would this have protected a paratrooper through a winter in Bastogne? If the answer is no, perhaps you're choosing the wrong equipment. The unbreakable cloth of World War II wasn't perfect, but it was purposeful. And that purpose, keeping humans alive in the worst conditions Earth can offer, remains as relevant today as it was 80 years ago. If you found value in today's exploration of how history teaches survival, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to understand that old doesn't mean obsolete, it often means battle-proven. And subscribe to The Lost Tactician, because we'll keep uncovering the lessons written in blood, sweat, and, yes, even the fabric of history itself. Until next time, stay tactical, stay prepared, and remember, The best gear isn't always the newest. It's what works when everything else fails.